let's go closer to home. Victoria, the election there. Look, for me, it's really very, very simple. I mean, you vote on results, don't you? And Victoria's Labor Premier, Daniel Andrews, has, well, look at the scoreboard, racked up the biggest debt of any state by far. He's had the most anti-corruption probes into his government running at one time, 4 still going, a 5th finished just earlier this year. His lockdown as capital city longer than any other city in the world during the pandemic. He's still left Victoria with the most COVID deaths of any state. Can you believe that? And so what's the argument here, you know? What's the argument? Out. And really, it is time for a cleansing of this ideological craziness in Victoria. And speaking of that, I now have to talk about the Liberals. I mean, seriously, guys? The Liberals have decided to preference the Greens ahead of Labor at this election. And nowhere are the Greens, of course, more radical in this country than in Victoria. I'll show you that in a sec. The Liberal strategy is quite obvious. It's going to force Labor to waste money and time to defend its inner city seats from falling to the Greens, helped by the Liberal preferences. And this then will also force Labor to go more extreme to win Green votes, and all that could help the Liberals win their seats against Labor, right? That's the theory. The problem is the Liberals could instead help elect real radicals from the Greens and legitimise them and give them a taste of power. Not good. And I'll give you an example of exactly the kind of Greens candidate who could now get elected with Liberal help. Campbell Gome. He's the Greens candidate for the seat of Thornbury and a global warming activist, despite campaigning in a very cold and wet late spring.
The Thornbury door knock has come to an early close because the heavens have opened up and the hail has been bucketing down.
But what amazes me is that this bloke is a state school teacher when he's glued himself to a BHP building in a protest by Extinction Rebellion, when he's been arrested in protests, when he's deliberately held up motorists in a global warming protest.
It was activists on bicycles causing headaches for commuters. This was Hoddle Street during the morning peak.
I think it's disgraceful.
2 separate intersections brought to a standstill by a bike brigade led by Assistant School Principal Campbell Gome.
We're a rolling traffic jam on wheels.
That's him at the end. I mean, seriously, why would the Liberals think he's better than the Labor candidate who's the daughter of a former sensible Labor minister, Theo Theophanous? This is putting politics above principle. Joining me is Michael Kroger, former Victorian Liberal President, and Steve Conroy, former Labor Senator and Cabinet Minister. Steve Conroy, Michael Kroger, why have the Liberals decided this guy should be in Parliament rather than the Labor woman?
Well, it's one of those tactical decisions that the party has made here in Victoria to create conflict between Labor and the Greens, but I certainly hope people don't follow on with the how to vote card, and I hope they certainly do not elect this guy. I mean, this would be one of the worst election results we've had in Victoria. He's more extreme than Lydia Thorpe. I don't know how he keeps his job in the education department. He's a repeated lawbreaker. So I think him winning would be shocking for Victoria and shocking for Northcote, and I just hope people don't support him in any way, shape at all, because he'll be a terrible acquisition for the Victorian Parliament, Andrew.
Well, this is the Liberals putting the party's interests above the state's, I would have thought. But Steve Conroy, it makes me look, this is a state school teacher. I know I'm talking about Victoria, so probably people are saying, of course. A state school teacher? I mean, this shows how politicised our education system has got under this Labor government, doesn't it? And I'll give you another example at the end of the show that will turn people's hair.
Well, look, people are entitled to their personal political views. I'm not sure what the rules around Victorian teachers are. If he was to express his views while teaching, or on the grounds of the school, then certainly there'd be an issue. But people are entitled to their private political views. But look, to Michael's point, unfortunately, the Liberals, the early voting, the pre-poll voting opened yesterday, and the Liberals are handing out a how to vote card, advocating electing this bloke, and their preferences will almost certainly decide the seat. So this is going to be an extraordinary own goal by the Liberals, the sort of green extremist that they have campaigned against, warned Australians about, they're going to contribute to putting this extremist into Parliament. He's very closely associated with Lydia Thorpe. He's actually removed images of himself with Lydia Thorpe from his Facebook page after her recent scandals. And the sooner, most Victorians in North could understand the type of individual that they've got on the ballot paper, I hope they follow Michael's advice and to not remotely give him a preference.
Except the flaw in your argument there is that you said Northcote. Mate, some people will look at what I just shown and thought, wow, that's my guy. That's the only trouble with that suburb. The Albanese government's new union laws really worry me. The company that runs all the tugs in 17 of our main ports is going to lock out all its 582 workers, which could mean chaos for Christmas if you're waiting for deliveries, of course. It says those workers are on between 130,000 and 200,000, so they're doing quite well. And their union has mounted 250 instances of industrial action, allegedly, since late October, to fight basically for union restrictions that the company says are nuts, like giving the union power to nominate union mates for new jobs, retaining the power to interview job applicants. But here's the thing that worries me. Workplace Relations Minister Tony Burke says that Labor's new workplace laws, have already gone through the lower house of the Parliament, would let a Fair Work Commissioner drop in and decide if the employer should just give in and cop this. Here he is.
I'm devastated by the way the whole dispute's unfolded. I want a situation where the industrial umpire can come in and sort it out.
Michael, that is really ominous. Is that Labor's plan to force crazy workplace laws on bosses on the say-so of some commissioner?
Well, this is the problem with what Labor are doing. You've got an agreement which has 1970s style clauses in it. You've got an industrial relations minister bent on giving more power to the unions, and you've got a company which can't tolerate all of these clauses, and it's seriously affecting its financial viability. I think the best answer would be for the union and the super funds to bid for this company and take it over themselves. I mean, they're running at half of the management now, as you've said, so maybe they should take over and see if they can run it themselves, because the way this is going, we're going to have enormous problems over Christmas, Andrew, and this is the type of thing that's being encouraged by Tony Burke, unfortunately.
Steve Conroy, I don't get it. How can... Look, it's the company's own money on the line. It's his own business. It's got a right to manage business. No one really seriously thinks a union should be sitting on and, saying which staff you should hire. You've got to hire my union mate over here or my uncle over there, or sit in job interviews. It's ridiculous. How can Labor delegate the responsibility for deciding this on some commissioner who's got no skin in the game?
Well, look, firstly, let's be clear, this is a dispute taking place under the industrial laws of the Abbott, Turnbull and Morrison governments. The laws that you're referring to that are being proposed have not passed Parliament yet. They are not the law. So this is existing.
He's saying this is how they're going to work. He's saying this is how they're going to work.
Well, look, Andrew, we're probably going to have, occasionally we do have really fundamental disagreements. I'm a proud union member. And I have no difficulty that when you get to a situation where you've got a cowboy employer who's seeking to get publicity rather than resolve a dispute, to stage a lockout and then try and blame the union because he's locked out the workforce. I mean, if there are shortages at Christmas, the boss has locked the workers out. That's the first point.
Yes,
but secondly, I absolutely support having an industrial umpire.
You know Paddy Crumlin as well as I do. You know Paddy Crumlin as well as I do, the union boss. They play chicken. They get caught out. The union you worked for was nothing like this one, believe you me.